Hello, everyone. This is Sincere of Teacher Sincere's channel, and welcome once again. Now, what if Netflix had taken on a non recycled story of another ancient queen that lived in Africa and encountered the Romans? What if I told you there was a spunky African queen to the south of Egypt who had the nerve to humiliate the Emperor Augustus, nephew of Julius Caesar? Would you believe me? This is a story of the Kushite ruler, Queen Amanirenas, the African queen who fought a 3-year war against the Romans from 25 to 22 BC, which ended in a stalemate and the Romans retreating. Queen Amanirenas was the ruler of the ancient African kingdom of Kush, which was located in what is now northern Sudan. A contemporary of the famous and infamous Pharaoh Cleopatra VII, Amanirenas, or the Kandaki, was born around the year 50 or 40 BC. Having Amanirenas as its sovereign was not unusual for the region because at various times for more than 3 millennia, Kush had queens and queen mothers as monarchs, some of whom were warriors. The destinies of Egypt and the Kingdom of Kush were intertwined during both their long histories. The pharaohs of Egypt's 25th dynasty were native Kushites, and the nobility and aristocracy of both kingdoms sometimes intermarried. Kush was one of Egypt's closest trading partners. For exchange for linen and grain, the Egyptians received gold, leather, ivory, and timber from the Kushites. Several years younger than Cleopatra, Queen Amanirenas lived during a time of great transition, especially for her neighbor to the north. After the defeat and deaths of Antony and Cleopatra, Egypt was annexed into the Roman Empire. All of Cleopatra's maneuvering and machinations were futile in the end. Now, with Egypt completely under the thumb of Julius Caesar's nephew, Octavian, or the Emperor Augustus, the Romans began to set their sights on the south to Nubia and beyond. They moved to the lands of southern Egypt and took over Nubia. Now, with Upper Egypt under their grip, the Roman Perfect started to impose heavy taxes on both the locals and goods brought into the region. Now, south in Kush, Queen Amanirenas and her husband, King Tereticus, were not ignorant of what was going on with their subjects under Roman rule in Nubia. They were keeping careful watch, but would not strike until conditions were favorable to them. Once the Roman perfect Aelius Gallus was away with troops fighting in Arabia, Queen Amanirenas and King Tereticus decided to make their move to liberate their people in Nubia from the iron fist of the Romans. Thus began the 5-year Kushite and Roman War. Early on in the conflict, King Tereticus died in battle, so the mantle of his rule came to rest fully on the shoulders of his queen. Queen Amanirenas, along with her son, Prince Kenadad, rose to the occasion and with her troops marched into Egypt, taking over a 200-mile swath of land, which included the cities of Selene, today's Aswan, ELPHNT, and Philae. Kushite forces enslaved and captured many Romans in these cities, and also vandalized statues of the Emperor Augustus. They decapitated a statue of the emperor and took the bronze head with crystal eyes back with them into Kush, where it was buried at the entrance to a temple, perhaps the Kushite way of humiliating the ruler and gaining even more patriotic support from the populace. The Romans were hardly amused. Strabo, a Greek historian, geographer, philosopher, and a contemporary of both Queen Amanirenas and Cleopatra, was a source of information about the Kandaki, writing the following about her and her forces. Now, before I read his words, I want to note that Strabo refers to Kushites as Ethiopians, because in ancient times, the people south of Egypt were given the name Ethiopians by the Greeks. Strabo wrote, the Ethiopians, emboldened in consequence of a part of the forces in Egypt being drawn off by Aelius Gallus, who was engaged in war with the Arabs, invaded the Thebes and attacked the garrison, consisting of 3 cohorts near Syene, surprised and took Syene, Elephantina, and Philae by a sudden inroad, enslaved the inhabitants, and threw down the statues of Caesar. He goes on to describe more of the conflict and says of Queen Amanirenas, Candace, queen of the Ethiopians in our time, a masculine woman, and who had lost an eye. The new Roman prefect, Gaius Petronius, gathered an army to march against the Kushite queen's forces. Enough was enough. With contempt, Petronius referred to Amanirenas as one-eyed Candace. Candace is the Latinized form of Kandaki. Though outnumbered, the Romans were able to drive the Kushites out of the region. Petronius decided to march into the Kingdom of Kush to punish this African queen. The Romans captured some Nubian towns along the way and then finally reached the Kushite capital of Napata. The queen offered to negotiate, but the Romans destroyed the city. Amanirenas was unharmed, however. Strabo writes that the queen was away in another stronghold when her capital was razed. The war between Petronius's forces and those of Queen Amanirenas went on for 3 years. An insurgency developed until finally a truce was declared. Strabo wrote, the enemy sent ambassadors, but he, meaning Petronius, ordered them to repair to Caesar. On their replying that they did not know who Caesar was, nor where they were to find him, Petronius appointed persons to conduct them to his presence. They arrived at Samos, a Greek island in the Aegean, where Caesar was at that time, and from whence he was on the point of proceeding into Syria, having already dispatched Tiberius into Armenia. The ambassadors obtained all that they desired, and Caesar even remitted the tribute which he had imposed. Never again did the Romans try to expand into the Kingdom of Kush. The treaty was in effect over 200 years later into the 2nd century. Also, unlike others who had stood up to the Romans, Queen Amanirenas' kingdom did not have to pay tribute again. The chief surviving information that can be read about Queen Amanirenas was written by Strabo. Much is still unknown about her life because the Meroitic script has not yet been deciphered. Despite her contemporary Cleopatra having long overshadowed her, what is known of Queen Amanirenas' story is so inspiring. Despite losing her husband and possibly even her son in the 3-year conflict, she did not give up and submit. Queen Amanirenas was a true patriot of ancient Africa and of world history. So ends the story of the Kushite, or some today would say the Nubian queen Amanirenas. Please check out the description below the video to links related to this tough and determined monarch. Please subscribe, like, and share. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. So this is Sincere. Until next time.